exceptions.
It's fair. I only buy Swedish imported axes. Like, 'cause I only prefer Swedish steel. Like, that sounds super hipster, and it is way hipster. But I'm being for real.
Is it any more hipster than my black ones?
No. My Swedish steel axes hold an edge way better than American steel. Just and longer. They don't need to be sharpened as frequently.
Same reason why you go for Japanese knives.
Exactly.
Because Japanese kitchen knives are direct descendants from samurai swords. And how cool is it to have the child with a samurai sword in your fucking kitchen?
Not to mention the Vikings, like, you know, the Vikings used axes as their, like, primary weapon of choice, so, like, they know axes.
Yes.
They've been making axes for a long time.
Exactly.
There's a channel in Sweden. Actually, I think it's in Norway. It's a public access channel, and it is so the first season of this channel, an entire channel, was just them burning wood in a fire.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. It was part of the slow TV movement.
Yeah, and then they were like, we need to have a segment on here for something other than just burning wood. And so they had a segment where a guy was chopping firewood and then stacking it, like in the background. But then that caused a whole bunch of controversies because apparently in Sweden there are two schools of thought behind stacking firewood. And so then they had to come up with two shows, one which is like this stacking method and one which is another stacking method. Now that channel is like a segmented channel about cutting story and burning firewood. It's on 24 hours a day. That's a country I can get behind. They have their priorities straight.
How would you say one? Next thing you know, they're going to start a knitting channel. I think I actually heard something about a knitting channel.
Yeah. So that would do good. I watched on CBS on Saturday afternoons. They have a whole thing with. Anyway. I watched her. She had like a stroke.
Hold out one by one. We had a story about each one.
He was really excited to show off all my networking.
Strokes don't take away the cooking knowledge, normally speaking. I bought the yarn to make a bot for 50 stuffing today. While I was out Christmas.
And he took all the trees that he
Now I have to wait for it to get shipped. Hand dyed, like 90% merino with a little bit of sparkle in it.
and realized
But you know what? I'm going to make the best damn fucking
cooler
stuffy
for money. Like, we need money for the league. These people need money.
Yeah, this one.
Nice.
Okay. All right.
I feel like I met you. I just don't ever remember anybody's name. I tried.
Three next month, or three is the end of this month. Apparently, we both have
Did you see my video on Slack?
I did not, because I couldn't get to play with them.
New Year's resolutions. It's like, oh, done.
My girlfriend's house.
We're pretty close to Halloween. I don't
I'm not familiar enough with that song to hear it through the dogs tapping, but I see the
Well, yeah.
I see the beat similarities.
I heard it many
We were
times.
trying to lay it out as our plan has
No, that's
progressed.
on
We
there, man.
specifically dabbled
No, I mean I've heard the song, I just haven't heard it enough to get stuck in my head.
Reminds me, they used to play Nine Inch Nails like Closer on the radio, and they used to censor it with dogs barking, and it was like a different dog every time. It was hilarious. It used to come on like just the all, station all the time.
December, there's like stuff going on, and like people are having events and things. January, nothing going on. Nobody has money, nobody wants to exercise.
FedEx-com. So it's the FTC network and FedEx-COM. You know, all lowercase FedEx.
Are y'all the ubiquitous family?
Write it on it.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I talked to you on Slack one time. I'm the one who recommended Ryan, who apparently jumped ship really quickly.
What's the SSID?
It's FTC or FTC dash something. I think it's FTC. It used to be just FTC. Oh, okay. Well, they made the password less secure. I changed the SSID.
Yeah.
I don't think they particularly care about the secureness of that particular Wi-Fi network.
Sure.
I don't even get to use it anymore because
They
now
let SSH and all sorts of
do
stuff
so
happen
much
on it, they
back
don't
in
want the other
development
networks.
and we
And they don't require you to log
bootstrap,
in like you do
and they
on
just
your
like
MGS.
our
I'm
app is
pretty
used
glad they did
only
that.
by employees of our
It would be a huge pain.
and so like my boss doesn't.
It didn't work well with the first that hacked
as long
Memphis.
as it works.
You couldn't SSH out
cares
the
so much more
networks
about
depending on
optimization,
geolocation apparently.
Speed
That's
of
what VPNs are
execution,
for.
then he cares about what it looks
No one
like.
wants to deal with that.
Bootstrap does.
I mean,
Good, that is okay.
it's super easy.
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
We're actually hiring a front end dev right now because we've been neglecting our storefront application
Yeah.
tools because we've got so much stuff on the backlog that their job is going to be to like revitalize our front end on our website. Which I'm kind of sad that I didn't get the help with that, but they like me doing what I'm currently doing. To keep
But
doing
they,
that.
sure none of them were pretty old.
I'm hoping that
No, I'm at Men's Rentals. I was at Rocket Fuel for a while. Yeah, I would have stayed at Rocket Fuel probably forever, but the people at Men's Rentals, they like really wanted me to come work for them, and they're in my favorite language. I love Ruby and Rails, and so they were like, we're doing Ruby on Rails, and then they offered me like a really big pay increase, a lot more vacation, all of the things, and I wasn't even looking for a job. It just like literally landed in my lap.
Can't hear me.
Like,
Focus down.
Same here.
I literally like looked at my name, like the guy who actually it was Ryan who sat next to me, and I was like, read this, and he was like, shit, you can't not do that.
It still hurts, Josh.
I
The
know.
pain is still fresh.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, like he's the one who told me to go apply there. But yeah, I was there for about like a month before he jumped ship.
It's
And
crazy,
left me,
like,
abandoned me.
because I work at Lens Reynolds too, and like, I found a picture from like 3 years ago where it's like me, Josh, Jason, Keith who works with us, and Ben who works with us, and other people, all in the same room. And I don't think any of us knew each other really at that point, and like well at least. And then we all ended up working together like a few years later.
I need CBT to cut their mobile position in half. And just
Yeah,
give me half
yeah,
of
I
it.
came after Josh, so he had just jumped
I
ship
need
right
CBT
before I
to
got
cut their
there.
mobile position in half and just give me half of it in January when I know what my schedule is.
It's fun though. There's not a lot of Rails in Memphis, so
Is that
probably why all these people are. It was a Ruby user group where that picture was taken, and like now all the people with that user
Because
group.
where else are you gonna do Ruby in
Yeah,
Memphis?
there's like 2 places or 3 places. Maybe Mosaic, maybe.
Simple focus.
Yeah, but the simple system
Oh, yeah.
.NET nowadays. too.
Yeah, I was
They're
gonna say
bigger
they
sets of
do
stuff.
some Ruby. They're not a Ruby shop.
I mean that remote.
So that's what the joke about I'm not telling you where I'm working now was all about.
Yes.
Is everyone else would know it except
No,
for me because I
actually,
didn't realize they
the
were the
whole-
only Ruby shop.
The whole thing was I posted that it was my last day at AutoZone, and then I went to a meeting, and then like I came back and Slack had just like blown up. So I was like, well, now I can't tell everybody. I gotta like ride this out. And so
You
yeah,
could have told us.
every once in a while, like somebody would pop in and like, we still don't know where Joe works. And I was like, yes, this is awesome.
I was so angsty about that.
I mean,
Like not in a horrible way.
Joe
but
actually DM'd me one day and said like congratulations. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. Like I totally thought I told you. Like I wasn't trying to keep it a secret. I was just trying to let that whole thing play out
Keep the joke going as
in
long as
Slack.
possible.
And I felt bad because there were a few people who like didn't know, and I was like, oh, I thought I told you.
I mean, knowing what I know now, I could have figured it out. I'm not a stupid.
Well, yeah.
Despite
I mean,
my
well,
number theory grade.
yeah, I mean it's a small town. Once you know who's using what and stuff, it's not too hard to figure out where they work.
And Josh, what do you say? Should we get started early? I feel like we have most everyone that's going to be here. We're almost out of table space.
Ryan and Daniel will be here.
I don't know where they are. That's what they get for saying have an extra drink or whatever.
Give me a
they're doing.
text them.
You don't geolocate your friends all the time?
Well, not the traditional one.
I basically mean anyone who wouldn't just forgive me.
My mom drives for Uber, and one of the coolest things ever was when they started doing the like friend geolocation thing for Uber drivers.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Because now you always know where your mother is.
yeah. Well, that's not cool, but it's at least she lives in Salt Lake City, so it's like nice to know that she's safe. As long as it's still moving.
Yeah.
The moment it stops moving and she's in the middle of a national forest, I'll call the police.
I always know where Gwen is because we share our location with each other.
I don't share my location with anybody.
It's come in handy a couple times because she'll be out with friends and then get overwhelmed and start seizing, and then I have to go rescue her. And if she's seizing, she can't tell me where she is.
I got an Uber ride the other day and said the driver had like 1,700 rides. We've been doing it for over a year.
That's crazy. So you do it like 4 or 5 times a day, you know?
Yeah.
It adds
I
up.
don't like people that much.
I would prefer my Uber driver not like people and not talk to me.
I don't know, man. I
I'm
kind of
antisocial.
enjoy it.
I would feel pressure to talk to the Uber driver.
I have yet to have like an awkward Uber ride.
So when you take an Uber,
I would have
you get in the front seat or the back seat?
I always get the back seat.
I don't know. A lot of times I
It
get the front
depends on
seat.
what they offer. True,
the
like one
driver.
time I got in the front seat because the guy like got out, ran around, opened the door for me, and I was like, I don't feel weird. But
It's
most of the
because
time
it
I try to
wouldn't
get in
unlock
the back
from the
seat.
inside.
Huh?
It's because it wouldn't unlock from the inside. So, like a lot of times they just have stuff in their front seat. So it's like, okay, back seat.
They're geared for like going a day long in the car.
Yeah, yeah. Like,
Anything they could find at the last minute to throw into the passenger seat.
Please don't sit here. Please don't sit here.
they like took their shoe off and put it in the front seat.
Being an Uber driver would require keeping my car clean, which I am incapable of doing.
I know you make money off of it. You can probably do a lot of things. So I say,
Do you make money though?
What's that?
Do you make
Some, not enough. I just realized that there's still such
Like-
September.
I feel like all my Uber drivers have nicer cars than I do. But I deliberately drive a crappy car. For some reason.
My car would be nice if it were clean, but it's not. Oh, and if I replaced one of the headlights and repainted my bumper.
All of these things would be important for making it look nice.
Don't do it. The other day my brake lights wouldn't go out, so I was like pulling the fuse every time I parked. I was gonna pull it just out, but you can't start the car.
I need to replace my driver's side rear light. But to do that on my car, I have to take off the entire taillight assembly. And so I was just going to have Walmart do it when they check
Just
my
Legos, man.
tires.
You could probably get AutoZone to do it.
It's a good like 30-minute process.
Let's do it, Josh.
Huh?
Let's do it.
When I got my brake lights fixed, the
You gotta
lady
come
at
up
the
here,
shop was
man. You're
telling me that
you're
this guy tried to
co-organizer
fix
now.
his
I'm not
like
standing up
power
here alone.
windows by watching some YouTube video.
I thought
Came
so
out with,
too,
like, a
but
complete mess.
apparently not.
And I was like, I did the exact same thing. I mean, I got it installed properly. Like, I watched a YouTube video installing my power windows. I don't see what the big deal is.
That's a lot of people all waiting to hear what we have to say. How's it going, y'all? Welcome to October's Web Workers. Don't believe what you see on the screen. It is October, not September. Although the presentation is George Spake with beginning and advanced Git techniques. A few things, I don't know everyone in the room, but if you are not familiar with the Memtech community, we have a lot of events that go on around town, literally 2 nights a week at least. Every week there are technology events. Most of them happen here on campus. Last week was the Dev Memphis meetup. That's kind of a generalist programming meetup. Next week we've got Python. The week after there's a PHP meetup. We do weekly lunches in East Memphis. There's lunches in Bartlett and downtown every couple weeks. Basically, if there's a programming language you're interested in, join the community in more than just web workers, and you'll find somebody who's interested in the same thing that you are. We have a Slack channel. If you go to memphiswebworkers.com, there's a chat with us link. You can click that, and you can join our Slack channel. Find out all sorts of good information in the community, as well as like we did a pregame tonight at Casual Pint off campus. And that's what we talked about, because we're really not very good at social media. So there's all of that. We're on Twitter at MemphisWW. We're on Facebook at Memphis Web Workers, where we are actually live streaming right now. We're trying to do more live streaming in the community and seeing how that works. It's just my phone tonight, so who knows if it'll be any good or not. So George, definitely speak up while you're presenting tonight and don't move too much.
Okay.
Let's see, Vaco Memphis is our sponsor. They've been our sponsor since we were literally in our second month, and have been along for the ride the entire time we've been doing this in Memphis, which is about 5 years now. They do recruiting in Memphis, or if you're looking for a tech job in Memphis, let me know. I'll get you in contact with my contact there, Bob. John, sorry, Bob's another Vaco person too. And they are incredibly helpful in placing you and work with you on resume and interview skills and stuff like that. So if you weren't here last month, but you've been to Web Workers in the past, you'll notice that this is not Eric Terpstra. He's much shorter than Eric. This is Josh Bryant, which many of you probably know. Eric is moving at the end of the year to Washington, D.C., so he will no longer be co-organizing Web Workers with me. Josh has agreed to step up and be my co-organizer along the way. Woo! It felt right, and I liked it. So as we kind of go forward, Josh will be doing all sorts of stuff and probably making me do stuff that I'm not wanting to do, but I'm lazy. So there's that. So he'll keep things alive and doing some cool stuff in Memphis. MemphisWebWorkers.com is our URL in case I didn't mention that before. And anything that I'm missing?
Nope. Just join us on the community if you're not already on there, because we keep a pretty lively conversation throughout the day in various Slack channels. There's literally like 100 of them. Pretty much anything, even if you're not wanting to talk about tech, there's there's Slack channels for just about anything. Books,
TV shows.
Just
If you're looking to waste time at work, that's really what it's there for.
Podcast.
There's even like a mental health channel, isn't there?
Yes.
Nice.
I
didn't
stuff
even
like
know
that.
I'm an admin on it.
Yeah, and so you should join the conversation at least, because it's fun. Sometimes you need to break from that daily code all day life. So yeah.
I've heard rumor that it's the most lively Slack channel or server in all of North America.
No, I believe it.
I wouldn't, but
I think George is the culprit for that. Yeah. I feel like he has a bot on his computer that just like every 5 minutes posts something controversial and then leaves.
That's the joy of it all.
All right. So I guess you're actually here to learn about Git and not hear me and Josh talk about community stuff, which 3/4 of you already know. So we'll let George come up and talk about Git advanced and beginner workflow. Thanks, George. There it is. All right. Where do you want to be? You want to be over there?
Yeah. Actually,
There's
why
nothing
not?
to play.
I'll just sit down.
If you stand up, you get that Babish effect, where your head is out of frame. Just so you know.
Okay, so this is good.
Yes, that looks good.
All right, so before I get into this, how many people have never used Git before? Awesome. So there's a few. Is there anybody who primarily uses, well, better yet, how many of y'all use Git every day? So a good bit. And then other revision control systems like SVN or, okay. All right, so just to get it out of the way, for anyone who's not familiar with the concept of version control or revision control, it's a way to track changes over time. We've all had the experience where you're sharing a Word document or something with somebody and it starts getting sent around and people add -1 to the end of it and -1 final and -1 final 1 and it's been emailed 60 different times and nobody knows what's going on. So the same kind of thing can happen with code. People can just horribly manage changes, or have historically and had to figure out some way to deal with it, so revision control was born. And Git has sort of become the predominant revision control system. There are other popular ones like Subversion and Mercurial that do things, but everybody likes Git, so that's what we're going to talk about. Also, Git is not something we see a lot of talks about because we all use it every day and we're all pretty familiar with it, and we all have our little workflows and stuff. So I've learned a lot recently. I've been using Git for like, 8, 9 years or something, and still learning stuff. And I've learned a lot of things just in the past few months that have completely changed the way I use it, and the way I think about revision control, and the way I label my commits, and all sorts of stuff. So I figured it was time to, share some of that. I also think that Git hasn't really changed much over the years. Git, just for a little history, was created by Linus Torvalds, the same guy who invented Linux, I guess, and I think there was some political drama around their existing revision control system, and Linus just went and wrote it over a weekend famously or something. So it's got good people behind it, and it's sort of universally used, and also platforms like GitHub and GitLab have really made it sort of just the king of revision control. Yo.
Can I add to your slight
Yeah,
history
definitely.
of Git? So Linus Torvalds, he didn't like his revision system at the time, specifically because he had to talk to people too much. And Linus Torvalds is notorious for being very socially awkward. And so he invented...
He's trying to change though.
Yeah. He invented Git very specifically to have the least amount of human interaction with someone else when submitting his code, getting it approved, getting it merged, and pushed to a single centralized branch.
Yeah.
I watched a whole YouTube channel, him giving an interview about why he invented Git.
Hey man, post it, I'll read it. I think it's a really good idea, anytime, even if you know about something, go read the Wikipedia page, because a lot of times this little history section is really interesting for stuff like Git, because you don't really think about it, but it, when you go down the rabbit hole, somebody at some point invented whatever the thing is, and it's kind of cool to see who it was, when it showed up. 2005 initial release. The thing wasn't made in the 80s, I guess is the point. So that's interesting. The way I'm going to do this is I just have a list of commands that I'm going to work down, and this is going to be all sort of live. So usually I have some slides and stuff, but tonight I'm just going to kind of work through it. So let's do something. I'm going to, so let me rearrange these a little bit because I'm not going to need that much. So I'm going to go to my desktop, and let me make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to make a directory called book. So back over on my desktop, there's my little book directory. And I'm going to go ahead and open this in VS Code, because that's where we're going to be working. And people like VS Code. I actually don't use VS Code much, so I might stumble a little bit, but that's fine. So we don't have anything in there yet. Let me see if I can just open both these. Okay, cool. So let me go ahead and create a file in here. So I'm going to create, better yet, we're going to get the first book cover we see. All right, we're going to think outside the box. Free promotion to Suzanne Dudley. Congratulations. All right. book cover, save.
Journey in and out of emotional captivity.
Huh?
It's a journey in and out of emotional captivity.
Yeah, well, don't judge the book content too much here.
By the cover.
Yeah. So I'm gonna drop that in this folder.
That wasn't a judgment. I was just saying.
Hey, I didn't write the book. So, but I'm gonna. So, we have a file in here now. Don't look at that. And now we've made changes to this project. And so, let's go ahead and start tracking this. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do I'm gonna cd into this directory. You can see we have book cover in here, and we're in desktop/book, so we're not in the right place. And so I'm gonna go ahead and initialize a Git repository, and the command for that is git init. So it's gonna give us a message that says initialize an empty Git repository in blah 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 .git. And if I go back over to my editor, you're not gonna see that. A lot of times your editor will actually hide the Git directory. But if I go in here, I'll see that .git directory. So this is where all of your Git stuff is for your project. There's just a .git directory in the top root level of your directory. And if we go over here to our command line and run git status, it'll tell us like what's going on with Git currently. So we're currently on the master branch. We'll talk about branches a little bit later, but when you initialize a Git repository, it's going to create a default master branch, and pretty much 100% of the time, the master branch is maintained as the primary main production ready to go branch. It says there are no commits yet. It says I have one untracked file. We'll talk about tracking. And it's saying, it actually gives us nice hints. So it's saying use git add and the file name to include in what will be committed. Okay, wording's a little weird. And it says nothing added to commit, but untracked files present. So at this point we have a Git repository, but we haven't committed anything. So before we commit, we're actually going to stage our files, and that's what it means where it's saying git add, and this is currently untracked. So if I say git add bookcover.jpg, now if I run git status, it's going to say there are changes to be committed. I've added something, I've staged it, so to speak, and now it's ready to commit. So if I want to unstage it, I can use this command to roll back what I just did. So let's go ahead and commit it. So now if I do git commit -m is the flag for message, and I'm just going to say initial commit. So, blam. So now if I say git status, it's going to tell me that I'm on the master branch, there's nothing to commit, and my working tree is clean, meaning there are no like dangling files that I haven't added or anything. Also, I'm not using bash here, I'm using ZSH with ZSH for my terminal. And that's what gives me this stuff, and this is really helpful. Like, based on the work I'm doing now, this hasn't been practical for me in the past as much as it is now, but it's great to see what branch you're on and whether it's clean or not. So in this case, I'm on the master branch, and the working tree is clean. Here, the working tree was dirty because I had files that weren't committed. Staged but not committed, and then before, I had files that weren't even staged, so they were untracked. So that's the gist of initializing a repository and staging files and committing. You can also do git add -a, right? To add everything.
Capital A.
Git add period, that's everything in the current working
Oh yeah, that's right.
That
Yeah,
too.
git add period will add all of your files. So a lot of times you're not just adding one file. You're gonna add like everything you've changed and commit that all at once. So let's see what we've got. We've covered init, status, add. We committed something with a message. Now if I run git log, so it's actually going to show me this commit, and this is the hash for that commit. Every commit has a hash, and you use them for things. A lot of times when you need to use a hash, you can actually just use a piece of it. So if you grab that and run whatever command you need that requires a hash or a ref, I guess, is you can just use the first part. But I don't think we'll get into anything today where we'll actually need that. But from time to time, when you're doing more complex stuff, you do need to know how to get to those and know what they mean and stuff so that you can reference them. So, what am I in here? What even is this? Q? Okay. So, now, part of the awesomeness of Git is that you can share things and work on things with other people. So, for this example, we're going to push this up to GitHub. And to do that, you'll want to create a GitHub account. I recommend using SSH keys to push and clone repositories because it's more secure. And you don't want to just be pushing stuff over HTTP. So GitHub actually has excellent instructions on how to set up SSH keys, even outside of the context of GitHub. This is usually kind of like the first place I go if I got to set up SSH keys on a new computer, because it's something I do like rarely. So I don't commit this stuff to memory. I just go to GitHub and you like copy and paste the commands, and then once you've created your SSH key, you can add it to your account in GitHub, and when you push to GitHub, it'll use your keys on your machine. That's a different talk. Right now, I'm going to go up to the top of GitHub and create a new repository, and I'm going to name it book, and I might actually already have one because okay. Memphis Web Workers book. So another thing to clarify for people who don't use Git every day is that GitHub is a company that hosts Git repositories as a service. It's not Git. Git is not GitHub. Git is a revision control system. It's free. It's open source. GitHub is a for-profit company that provides people with free and paid repositories. If you want to host private repositories like we do at work, we don't want people looking at our code. Our repositories are private, but if I want to host an open source project, it's free to host as much stuff as you want, I think, on GitHub. There's probably some limit, but for the most part, GitHub is free to normal people, and if you want to use it for business stuff, you got to pay for it. So it's huge for open source. A lot of open source projects are hosted there, like React and all that good stuff, Laravel. So just want to make that clarification because a lot of people have a hard time distinguishing the difference between GitHub stuff and Git stuff in the beginning. And there's some terminology overlaps that don't mean the same thing, so just something to be aware of. I'm going to create a public repository. And I'm not going to initialize this repository with a README. On GitHub, this is an example of like a GitHub feature. If you add a README to your project, not go to that one. Let's see, memphistechnology.org. There's a readme.md file in here. GitHub, in its user interface, displays the markdown in that readme.md on the homepage. So it seems like just about every project you see on GitHub will probably have a readme.md. And you can also put those in specific folders. Like you could go put a readme in app/config that tells you stuff you need to know about app/config. But I'm not going to do that for this repository because I already have a repository. If I was going to create a new repository and then clone it to start a project, I'd probably do that. But in this case, I'm going to initialize this with nothing because we're going to create it all. So after that, GitHub is going to give me the exact instructions I need. So it's going to say, so it actually, I can just copy and paste this. So this is git remote add. So this command is adding a remote to my Git repository, and we're going to call it origin, and this is going to be the location of the remote. So I'm adding a remote called origin at github.com gp-spake book.git. So let's do this. Done, okay. And I think, I forgot what is the, is it like git remote? Maybe that's -A.
It's git remote list.
What?
Or
Is it show?
-A.
Huh?
Git remote -A.
Ah, wait, did I not try that?
You
Did I just
try-
type A?
Try -B for both
Okay,
There we go.
There we go. So this is showing our remotes. So our fetch and push remote for origin is at that same URL. You can actually have different push and pull remotes. So a good example would be if I want to pull from sort of the main repository and push up to a separate repository so that I can merge from my secondary repository into the main one. So there are cases where you want to have a different push and pull remote. In this case, we're just going to be using the same one because we want to pull from this repository and we also want to push to it. So now that I have a remote added, back over to GitHub, you can push this up with git push, and we're specifying we want to push it to the master branch on the origin remote. And the origin there is completely arbitrary. We could have just as easily named that GitHub. That's another thing that you'll see a lot is, you'll have different remotes named like GitHub and I don't know. These are options.
Upstream is common. Upstream is common.
Yeah, like if you're pushing to Heroku or something, you might have a separate repository managed there. But yeah, it's really easy to set all this up, and the great thing about Git is it's so flexible, you can really do anything with it. So if you need to do that stuff for some reason, it's an option. Heroku is a good example, or your like cloud staging environment, if it's in a place that sort of triggers continuous integration based on a Git push, then you might have a different name and a different remote. You can have multiple remotes for a single repository. So this is sort of output there. So it pushed that branch up, and actually if I go back to GitHub now and refresh, we'll see that book cover up here. I hope somebody goes and looks at that. This is my latest project, y'all. So that's remote stuff, and that was kind of that whole section I had about that. There's really not much more to it, other than now any of you can go to my GitHub and clone or download, and I'll give you the command. So to clone this, you could just git clone So this is well, I cloned the wrong repo, but even better, I just cloned the MemphisTechnology.org website. So now I'm down on my computer. If I do git status, I'm up to date. Git log, I can see a bunch of commits on that repository. A bunch of them just say fix typo. Oh look, that's me. That's all I do is fix typos. So yeah. So now people can pull that down and you can collaborate on projects and stuff. So great. Finally, I don't know why DS store is not getting created in here. Do you have to like do something to trigger DS store getting created? Yeah, I mean that's what this is.
I try to open up a file and find it and it creates DS.
Oh yeah, that's right. I don't know. Well, the point is, typically, you're going to have files in your repository either generated or created automatically by your operating system that you don't want to create. So let's just pretend we have one of those. I'm going to create a new file called like touch some dumb OS thing. Okay, so now I have this file called, oh, there's DS store. Even better. Okay, so I have the DS store, and if I do git status, it's actually seeing that file, and that is not part of my project. It's just a Mac OS thing. I don't want that in my repository, and I don't want it getting pushed up. This could also go for like secrets, like if you have a config file that has all your keys in it and stuff, everybody's going to have that on their machine, on your team while they're developing, but you don't want to push that stuff up, even if your repos are private. That stuff never gets committed to revision control. You don't want that getting committed anywhere as secrets. So what you do, let's create a gitignore file. And I'm going to just add, of course, I'm going to forget what it's called. Anybody know? Is it underscore?
It's underscore capital S-T-O-R-E.
No?
Yeah.
Alright. And yeah, so just like that, if I do git status now, it's not tracked anymore, but I do want to commit my gitignore file. So I'm going to say git add everything, git commit -m add gitignore. And people have opinions about commit messages. I just, for some reason, out of habit, tend to do like, you know, that tense with lowercase. Some people put emojis in all their commits and junk. And the emojis mean stuff like this is a hot fix or this is a new feature or whatever. I typically just do it like this. It's my preference. There's no right way to do that. Commit messages are, as long as they're descriptive, that's what's important. And that's pretty descriptive. I mean, I added a git ignore. And now, git status. Your branch is ahead of origin master by 1 commit. Use git push to publish your local commits. Nothing to commit, working true clean. So it's telling me to git push. If I just run git push, because I've added that remote, I don't even need to specify anymore like what branch I'm doing if I'm just pushing a master. So if I go back over here, did I really close that repo? Alright, let me go back to this. Repositories, book. So GitHub tells you all that cool stuff too. Like it tells me I pushed like a minute ago tells you what the hash on the latest commit was, who did it. This stuff is really useful when you're working on a team and you can see like somebody just pushed something a minute ago. This repository has had 2 commits. It only has 1 branch. We'll talk about branches in a minute. Currently only has 1 contributor. So you'll see we have that git ignore now. And if I go back, you can see the 2 commits. You can look into them to see what changed. And that gets cool when we're actually changing stuff and not just creating new files. So let's do like index.md. So now I have an index file, and I'm also going to do chapter1.md, and I'm going to let's see. Oh yeah, I said I'd do this in VS Code, so I'm just going to say chapter 1, and I'll add that to the index. Yeah. Actually, I'm just going to leave that. Don't judge me. 1. Okay. I did colon X. This isn't them. Alright. Coming back over here, if we check our git status again, we've now created these files, chapter1.md and index.md. So I'm going to go ahead and add them. Git add git commit -m add chapter 1. Okay, cool. Another command that's useful to know is git commit --amend. It might just be 1. Okay, cool. So this will open you up in a little UI thing here. This is actually Vim. I think it'll just open up your default text editor, which for me is Vim. But up here at the very top, it's going to have a commit message, and I'm going to say with index. So I've actually just modified my commit message. And so now if I do git log, you'll see that the commit message says add chapter 1 with index. So if you ever screw up and mistype a commit message, which I do all the time, I use git amend a lot. But I do it a little differently, which I'll show you in a minute. So now, so far, this is where I get to draw stuff. So far, everything we've done has been on a line. So we had an initial commit, and then we had git ignore, and then we had chapter 1 or whatever. And so when you're working on a project with hundreds of files and multiple people are editing the same files, you don't ever want to do anything to break this. So a good way to think about it, since we're talking about a book, is anytime I push a change up to the master branch, it automatically gets shipped to the publisher. And I don't want to ship the publisher a bunch of crap that I'm just throwing together. I want to keep that on a separate branch, or without even getting into branching. I want to work on that in such a way that I don't mess up what the publisher is seeing. And sans revision control, people do all kinds of dumb stuff to accomplish this, like copying the whole folder and making their changes and then copying them back over or something. But in Git, we have this concept of branching where I can just create a whole new little branch here and make commits on it without affecting the master branch. So let's do that. To do this is actually since we're looking at commands here, there's a great, and this is probably a good time to talk about the Git website. So if you go to git-scm.com, that's where you'll find the Git documentation, and it's good to get used to reading it, but it's a little man-pagey, so it's not always the best about examples. However, the Git book, which is on the Git website, is really helpful and does have great examples. So there's this great post on there about branching and merging with just all the basic stuff, which is exactly what we're going to be doing. So in this case, the command isn't actually, well, there is a git branch command, but typically when you're creating a new branch, you're going to be using git checkout with the -b flag, which creates the branch for you. So if I do git branch, do I have to have that in quotes? I don't even remember.
That just has to be all connected in order.
Yeah, you can't have spaces. Chapter 2. Oh wait, what did I do? Oh, I said git branch. Check out. Cool, so now you'll see my terminal reflects that I'm on the chapter 2 branch. Let's see what happens when well, let's go ahead and create chapter 2. Chapter 2. .md. And then yeah, let's go add something to it just so there's something in chapter 2. Chapter 2. Save. And git add. So it shows, and now I'm going to commit chapter 2. -m add chapter 2. Okay, so let's look at what we got here. So I've got a few different commits. It shows me what branch I've put on. And what state everything is in at that time. So if anything's changed about Git, I feel like this is sort of an important, substantial part of this whole thing. If anything's changed about Git, because Git itself has not changed very much over time, at least while I've been using it, it's the tooling around it. And in our little world of programmers, you'll meet a lot of people who are sort of anti-UI, pro command line, all the things. And to some extent, I'm one of those people. I think it's really important to understand what I'm doing up here if you're going to be using Git. You need to know these commands, and the whole nature of this talk tonight is understanding these commands and these terms and what they mean and how they work. That said, a lot of people use Git, a lot of programmers use Git, a lot of programmers write software, and that's what we do, right? So it stands to reason that the people writing tooling for Git are Git users, and they write good stuff that works well. So there are a bunch of sort of UI tools for Git. I've used SourceTree, it's great. GitHub has a desktop tool that's great. And I use GitKraken, and I'm a big fan of it. It's free if you're using it for personal stuff, and it just has a lot of really good features. And I think all of the Git tools kind of aim at doing one thing and one thing well, and they're usually pretty good at it because Git's, despite its complexity, pretty straightforward. The day-to-day stuff is pretty easy to lay a UI on top of. This is pretty easy to understand, which, by the way, just to update this, we've branched off and added a chapter 2. So it's easy for us to think about how we might visualize some of this stuff, and that's exactly what GitKraken does. So I think there's two extremes. There's the people who will only use GitKraken and will not learn this stuff, and those are the people that the hardcore command line advocates sort of resent because they're missing out, they don't fully understand what they're doing. And then there's the people who are only command line and will like scoff if you use these tools, which is equally as ridiculous because they're awesome. So that's sort of my pitch about using UI tooling, and now I'll prove it. So I'm going to open this repository we've worked on in GitKraken. And this is generally the same for GitHub and SourceTree and other Git tools. I almost feel like having used this, it's like borderline irresponsible, at least that's how I feel, to just be adamantly opposed to these tools because they provide so much value. So if I just walk through this, we already know what a lot of this stuff is. I can pull from GitHub, I can push to GitHub, I can branch, we've done that already. Here are my local branches, here are my remote branches, and I can even go in here to Origin and edit those remotes. So if I want to change a remote, you know, this is where it gets sort of, you know, emotional for some people. I don't need to know that command because I can just come in here and change it at a click of a button. If I'm on a terminal, you know, remote it into some server somewhere, like I need to know that command. But my argument is, I don't need to know that command. I know what the command is. I just Google it and I get it from the Git website. Like in real life, that's not something I need to memorize. I'm gonna have the internet, even if it's just my phone. But most of the time, you know, I use Git every day for 8 hours. I'm doing this stuff 100 times a day, and like I just don't care. Like Git is cool, but like most of the time I'm just trying to get work done. So this is awesome. Before we saw Git amend, now I can just click on my previous commit and type whatever. There are some things that you can't do in GitKraken, which I'm going to talk about, particularly rebasing, but not all rebasing. You can do some pretty fancy rebasing stuff in GitKraken. So at this point, I'm actually going to be bouncing back and forth between command line stuff and GitKraken. For example, right now, it shows me that I have this chapter 2 branch checked out. It also shows me that I've added, these are all the commits to date on this project. I added an initial commit, I added a git ignore. We can see by that little cat GitHub logo right there that this commit, this branch at this commit has been pushed up to master. But then we made another commit on our local master branch, which is that little computer icon that shows me this is local. So here I have this chapter 2 branch. It's also only on local, and we can see we don't even have a remote version of that branch. And so I'm actually going to push chapter 2 up. And this is something where, like, if you're on the command line, you kind of got to know some things, but Git is, it's easy to determine what you're trying to do here. So it's easy for GitKraken to say, it looks like you're pushing a branch. Maybe you want to push it to a remote branch at Origin with the same name, which 99% of the time is the case. So I'm going to submit that. It's going to push up. And then I'll see that GitHub and my local version of chapter 2 are in line. And again, another thing, like checking out a branch, like most of the time I'm in this dashboard, like it's nothing to just double click on a branch to check it out. So I just switched over to master by double clicking it. I'm gonna push it up. And since I'm on master, I'm actually gonna delete the chapter 2 branch from my local machine. So I just deleted the branch. And like I read an article the other day about remembering to delete branches and how common it is for people to like have problems because they have 40 branches checked out on their computer. Like I see them all the time. This dashboard is amazing at like nagging me to clean up my Git mess constantly. So if I need to rebase on master, like anytime something gets pushed up to master by someone else on my team, I know about it and I rebase constantly. And it's kind of funny because I can see my teammates and like judge them because they're not rebasing and stuff. But anyway, so I just deleted my local branch, but it's still up on the remote. And if I just double click a remote branch, it's going to check it out locally. So let's do something crazy here. I'm going to go back to master, and I'm actually going to start work on chapter 3. So I'm going to, again, we saw the command for this already. I'm on the master branch. I'm going to, and actually if we click back to my terminal, everything's using the same Git directory here. So if I hit enter, you'll see that I'm on the master branch now. Because all that metadata is in my Git directory. So I'm going to branch off, again, this time using the UI, because it's just so easy to click branch and type in chapter 3. Blam, done. And I'm going to go back over here and touch chapter 3.md. Let's see what's in here right now. Because I'm on the chapter 3 branch and I branched off of master, there's no chapter 2 in there. That's still on this chapter 2 branch. So actually at this point, I've got another branch off of master for chapter 3. And that would be the commit that I'm gonna add, which I haven't done yet. So this is what it looks like in GitKraken. Again, this is just a great visualization. I have a local branch called chapter 3. There's no remote version of it yet. I haven't pushed it up. You can see now chapter 2 is split off. You can actually start to see this branching because there's more than one branch. And then I have this dotted line that shows me that there are unstaged changes, or there are uncommitted changes on this branch currently. So I've created this chapter 3 file, and let me actually just have everything consistent. Go ahead and chapter 3. All right. Chapter 3. Okay, this gives you a little UI to stage and commit stuff, which is awesome. And this is one of the things I have a hard time living without when it comes to the command line, because when you've edited like 16 files and you want to grab like single lines to stage, it's one of the great things about Git is that you can do this. Like let's say I create, well, let's just do it with this. So I can actually say I just want to stage like these lines somehow. Oh, I'm looking at the diff. Why is this not working? I do this like every day. It must be because I just created the file. I think it's because it's not actually changes.
It's additions.
So the UI is being funky, but we'll have an example. I'm getting ahead of myself. So I've got this new file. I'm going to stage the file. And I can write a description here, add chapter 3, and commit changes. And I see those committed. Now, let's look at our code here. Chapter 1, chapter 3, index. Oh, while I'm working on chapter 3, I realized I made a typo. I left my little vim exit in there too. So I'm just going to take care of that, and I'm going to say fix chapter 1 typo. We'll use this later when I get to all the fancy stuff. And then, what else? I'm going to go ahead and add chapter 3 to the index. Yay. And then I'm going to say add chapter 3. Yeah. To index. All right. So now let me go ahead and so this is where, like, at some point you're gonna have your changes. You know, you've added the index, whatever. So at some point you're gonna want to get this back into the main branch, and that's called merging. And this is another one of those things where you want to know how to do this from the command line, because it's like one of the most critical sort of features in Git, but it's also something that now that I've used this, I really like to have that visualization to know I haven't screwed something up. And the way merging works in GitKraken, it's another thing I like to think of, because you'll get errors, is if you're merging a branch or deleting a branch, you usually want to be on the branch that you're going to end up on. So if I'm merging into master, I'm going to want to switch over to the master branch before I do the merge. Obviously, like right now I'm on chapter 3. If I try to delete chapter 3, it's going to give me an error and say you can't delete this branch, you got to switch branches first. Also, if I change stuff, like let's say touch new file. Right now I'm on chapter 3. I have well, I don't exactly know what the conditions are. Typically you can't switch branches if you have uncommitted or untracked files, so you need to do something with them. And one thing you can do is git stash. Why didn't it like this? Huh? I like just looked up git stash on
Git stats and see what's in that branch right now. It says there's no local stuff.
I created a new file.
It has to be a stash.
Oh yeah.
Committed.
Git is weird about files with nothing in them.
I think it has to be tracked, but not committed.
Yeah, it has to be staged to be committed, and otherwise you
Oh,
move
yeah, that's
those
right.
uncommitted, unstaged
Yeah.
changes to the next branch.
You're right. So if I say git status, git add, what happens if I try to push there? Right? Well, whatever. It's not liking me. Bad example. GitKraken will do it though. If I click stash, GitKraken will know what to do, and it'll just create a little stash for me that we can come back to later. So let's leave it alone. So merging, I'm gonna jump over onto the master branch and just right click on chapter 3 here and say merge chapter 3 into master. How cool is that? Now I'm on master and I have all those changes still. If I go over here, I got chapter 1, chapter 3. Chapter 3 is in the index. I still got those changes. I could actually pop this stash right now and have those changes available on my branch. And I do this all the time. So I stash stuff constantly to switch over to a branch to fix some test or something, to get a review in and then switch back because I'm not ready. I'm still working on something. I'm not ready to like make a commit yet for whatever reason. So that keeps it there. Not going to lose it. It's not going to get tangled up, and it'll tell you which branch it's on. So like a lot of times I'll have like 3 stashes and it'll say like, work in progress on chapter 3, and so I'll know what files are in there, and I use that a lot. And this doesn't really cost anything because you have this UI that's sort of telling you everything that's going on all the time.
You can see the graph in the command line.
You can. And
What's
what's
in the command line at that point? Hey George, real fast, since I could just ran into this, I may or may not be working over here, I'm sorry. It's if, so the issue we were running into where you
Yeah.
couldn't get the error, if by checking out another branch, your changes would be overridden. So if you have changes.
because I created a
that-
new file.
Exactly, yeah.
Gotcha. Cool.
You can do git log dash dash graph dash dash one line graph dash dash one line, all one word, dash dash all dash dash decorate, and it makes a graph.
Well, I mean, it seems verbose, but you could easily create a.
Yeah, you could put it in your
You could
file.
create an alias for this, and there, and in fact, I think, let's see, yeah, like I think ZSH actually has like a ton of aliases for Git just ready to go. So you don't even have to write them yourself. You can like get popular collections of Git aliases for stuff like this, and then you have to run this command all the time. Also, I'm glad you brought that up because, you know, just to add context here, a lot of this stuff you're seeing in the user interface, like dashboard that is GitKraken, is just Git. I mean, it's not any fancy extra features, which arguably is a better case when you're talking about not using a GUI. You know, if you're criticizing somebody for relying on GitHub too much because pull requests are kind of a GitHub thing and they're not really a feature in Git proper the way that they are in GitHub, that's one thing. But this case of using this graph and stuff, you know, this is just plain old Git. They're just putting a nicer interactive dashboard on top of what Git already gives you. So that's cool. This is that's good to know. And now it's in my history, so maybe I'll use it.
I thought you'd like it.
Yeah, that's good stuff. But also, like, you know, when you're writing code all day, you're bouncing back and forth between, you know, across a bunch of different stuff. It's easy to just get like lost and like not have any idea what you're doing. And this is kind of like an always like grounding point dashboard where I can like get back to what I'm working on, see what's going on, and sort of visualize everything. I'm a really visual person, so I've just merged into master here, and in fact, typically we wouldn't do this. In fact, another great thing about GitKraken is I can just undo. So I just undid that merge into master. Actually undid the whole commit. So I'm going to say add chapter 3, add chapter 3 to index. And this is the same commit message, it's just multi-line. So I'm going to push that up. And I pushed it up on master. Oh well, that completely defeated the point of the whole thing. Let me switch over to, what did I do? Completely, this is nice, I've blown stuff up. So if I look, and this is the kind of thing where if you're doing a bunch of stuff fast, things can get out of control, and you know what you're doing. I'm going to go ahead and delete this stash because I don't care about it. So that's that easy. Master on the remote is at the commit, add chapter 3. Master locally is add chapter 1 with index. I'm going to switch back over to chapter 3, and now it's blowing up. Unstage all those. Trash that. That's another thing, I can just reset everything. So I'm going to jump over to chapter 3. I'm going to push this up to GitHub. And the joys of using GitHub. If I go back over here, it's going to tell me that chapter 3 got pushed in less than a minute ago. I'm going to compare and create a pull request and say added chapter 3 and added to index. hold on. Before I do this. This is something I never did before I used GitKraken, just because I'm lazy and I never put the time into it. But it's really useful. While I was working on this, I fixed a typo that was not related to the thing I'm working on. And it really doesn't belong on this branch or in this pull request. It belongs elsewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back over to master. And since I never branched off for chapter 1, I'm just going to go ahead and cherry pick that commit over to master. And all I have to do in GitKraken to cherry pick a commit, again, this is something I do a lot. So, because a lot of times it's only 1 or 2 commits that I need. I'm on the master branch right now. I'm going to cherry pick this one commit, and it's just as easy as right-clicking on it and saying cherry pick commit. And it's going to pull it over, and it says, do you want to immediately commit changes? And I'm going to say yes. Notice right now, and if you'll notice, it pulled that commit over to my master branch from the chapter 3 branch. And I'm not just going to delete that commit from chapter 3 yet, but we'll get there. So right now, notice that my local master branch is off from my remote master branch. And in fact, because I pushed stuff to master previously that I don't want pushed up there, and I've also changed stuff locally, I want to, I'm going to have to force push master back up. So I'm going to force push that, and that's going to bring my local and remote master back in line. So that's where I am right now. So now I'm in this situation where, master is ahead of the branches I'm working on. I want to specifically do something to break stuff here. So let me see. Okay, yeah, that should work. So let's see. I'm going to all right. I didn't want to jump into this yet, but I actually want to get rid of this chapter 1 typo commit on my chapter 3 branch. And so I'm going to check out chapter 3. I'm just doing that to make the command line people happy. I could have just as easily clicked on chapter 3. Rebase dash I. And this is kind of the grand finale, so don't write this down. I'm actually going to drop that commit. I'm just going to get rid of it from this branch because I cherry picked it over to master, and now I just want to get rid of it from the branch. And don't worry too much about what I just did. Why did I not like that? Anybody got ideas? This is why you want the so this is why you want the command line. So I actually just aborted that rebase. One thing I might be able to do is you can also reorder commits. So I'm gonna reorder these, and now that one is like the last commit I made on this branch. Why is it not like that? Alright. Git rebase dash dash. Oh, it's because I edited the index. Crap. Which is also edited in other places like here. Okay, well that's not working very well. Oh well. This is a puzzle. So the reason it's not letting me do that is because I edited index.md in a different commit, and those changes are represented here as well. Tell you what, since I know what the change is, I'm actually just going to reset the chapter 3 branch to this branch. And this is easy in GitKraken too, because I can just say git reset hard to this commit. So now I'm on chapter 3 branch, and if I go back over here, chapter 3 has not been added to the index. So I'm going to say chapter 3 ... 3 save.
Those are short chapters.
Are they? Well,
That
all
means
needs one
that's
page.
That starts on page 3.
Well, you don't know how many the pages are.
That's
This is the internet.
favorite.
Pages can be infinite.
Use your imagination.
Oh. I was thinking reasonably file size pages.
So on this chapter 3 branch, I added chapter 3 and I also added chapter 3 to the index. A lot of times you run into situations where this commit does not need to be here. It's just a waste. And nobody wants to read it. And this is sort of one of the ways my philosophy has changed about revision control recently, because I used to hate big multi-file commits and stuff, but now I realize, like, they serve a purpose. You know, they should describe the work you did, and you don't necessarily need to commit every single fixed typo. So clearly that opinion has changed since I did that thing on the web workers repo. So what you just saw a minute ago is rebasing. And a lot of times rebasing refers to sort of resetting to a particular point, which we'll see like the standard use. But another thing you do when you're rebasing is squash. So squashing is basically taking two commits and just combining them together. And GitKraken makes that really easy, because you can just click on two commits and say, and sometimes it won't let you. Oh, it's because I'm not on master. So if I'm on master, I should be able to just squash these two commits. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it like that never happened. So now it's going to keep that commit message, but if I go look at chapter 1 in the index, it's like that typo never happened. So I'm actually just going to, because I can just edit it right there, update the message, get rid of that line about fixing a typo, because there was no typo. That never happened. People reviewing my code do not want to know that I made a typo and then fixed it. It's too much. Just like wrap it up. I'm also going to go back over to chapter 3 here and push that up. Force push. Because I've made changes to chapter 3 from what are on the remote. And so now everything but master is back in line, and I've also sort of rebased master, which you would never do in a typical Git workflow. You'd have a pull request or something, but YOLO. So, cool. So we talked about merging. So now I'm going to go ahead and merge this chapter 3 branch into master. I'm on the master branch right now, and I'm just going to right-click chapter 3, merge chapter 3 into master, and I get a conflict. Another case where it's great to have this dashboard sort of at your back helping you out with things. It's going to tell me, and again, this is all just Git. You know, you can do this sort of diffing, so to speak, in the command line and resolve conflicts and that sort of stuff. But why? Like, it's 2018 and we have awesome tools for this kind of stuff. So in this case, I have two conflicting files here. And I need to resolve this conflict. And in this case, my chapter 3 branch still has a typo, but on master, it's been fixed. So I'm actually going to accept these lines from master, but I'm also going to pull in this chapter 3. And there's some space in here, so you can actually go in and edit this manually. So I'm going to save that change. GitKraken tells me like, okay, that's been resolved. So now your files are staged. All you have to do is commit and merge them. So now I've merged that chapter 3 branch into master. And if I push master, those changes will be, it's thinking. All right. So now, oh yeah, I mean it's great, and when you get into rebasing and stuff too, when you have like 12 conflicts, it just steps you through each conflict in the div, and it's super nice. So I'm back on the chapter 2 branch, and I'm actually going to go in. Let's see, I've added chapter 2. I'm actually going to let me jump over here. I'm on the chapter 2 branch. There is no chapter 3. It doesn't exist as far as this branch knows. In fact, this branch still has that typo. But I'm going to go ahead and add chapter 2, and I am going to go ahead and fix this. Land. All right, so let's stage that, add chapter 2 to index. Cool. And actually, before I push, I'm going to go ahead and because I'm sort of like comfortable with rebasing, I typically use interactive rebasing, which is git rebase -I for interactive, and then the number of commits away from the head that you want to deal with. And so like you typically don't want to go farther than there are. So in this case, I want to only deal with 2 commits. Weird stuff can happen if I were to say like 10 commits or something. But in this case, I'm on the chapter 2 branch. I'm gonna type git rebase -I head squiggly 2. That's what I call it. And then it tells you what you can do here. And so you could just as easily have your terminal open this in VS Code or something. But you actually have a lot of options here. You can, and some fun Vim tricks I learned when I was working on this. CW to change word, and then you could say R to rename that commit. You could type S to squash that commit into the one above it. You could say D to drop the commit. Those are most of what I use, and then pick is just like leave it as is. So a lot of times I will go in and reorder a bunch of commits so that the relevant ones are grouped together, and then once they're grouped together, I can usually figure out some way to squash them. In this case, adding the chapter 2 and adding them to the index, in my opinion, don't need to be 2 separate commits. So when you say when you save that file with that S in it on that second commit, it drops you into this little UI where it's going to say this is the first commit message, this is the second commit message. I'm just going to delete. Actually, what is it? Undo. Okay. Save that. Successfully rebased and updated. And just to see that with our own eyes, which is just why this is so great. This is actually what happens when you rebase farther back than your commits are. For some reason, that has add chapter 1 with index on it. Whatever, we don't care. So let's push this up. So the scariest thing about revision control is conflicts. And once you sort of know your way around conflicts and how they work, it's a lot less scary. So understanding rebasing and cherry picking and stuff is really valuable. To index. So what I'm doing now is I've pushed up my chapter 2 branch, and I want to open a pull request to merge it into master. And I get basically what this is GitHub gives you a little UI or a little like lobby to talk about code and do code reviews and stuff before it gets merged in. And so this shows me all the stuff that's changed. And it's actually telling me right now that I can't automatically merge this. And I'm going to go ahead and create the pull request. And there's a lot of really cool features. This is probably the greatest feature on GitHub because there's so much you can do here in this little like UI. You can add reviewers to code review this. You can require that somebody review it before it gets merged in, which we do. Like in order for a branch to get merged into master, you have to assign reviewers and they have to approve the pull request. So it's like forced code review. You can add labels. If you're working on a big open source project, labels are great. A lot of this stuff is just GitHub stuff. It's not necessarily Git, it's just really nice features, and it's why we pay GitHub a lot of money. So this is what I wanted. This branch has conflicts that must be resolved, and it's index.md because they're different on master. Remember, on master we have chapter 3 in the index, and on this one we have chapter 2 in the index, and I could resolve those conflicts right here on GitHub. And what GitHub would do is it would merge master into the chapter 2 branch and force me to resolve those conflicts upon merging master into chapter 2. At that point, chapter 2 will have all the changes that are on master, and I'll be able to push it. That's how I've typically done things, and that's how, GitHub, what GitHub defaults to. The thing that sucks about that is you have this merge master into my branch commit that kind of clutters up your history and doesn't really mean anything and shouldn't be there, and those conflicts should be resolved a different way. So GitKraken makes this a lot easier for me to wrap my head around. And what we're going to do is rebase, and we're not using rebase the same way we used interactive rebasing. Basically what we're going to do is we branched off and started working on chapter 2. In the meantime, someone else branched off and started working on chapter 3, and that's since been merged into master. And we are still back here on this commit on master, but things are moving along, things have changed, and we're still stuck back here. So what we want to do is we want to move this or rebase it on this commit on master. That's what rebasing is. So we're going to take this and we're going to move it up here, and in the process of doing that, we're going to have to resolve our conflicts. And GitKraken makes that nice and easy. So if I'm on the chapter 2 branch, the terminology here is I'm going to rebase chapter 2 onto master. This seemed a little weird to me at first, and it kind of like I've heard people use this, but something about seeing it in GitKraken and actually touching that sort of mechanism and interaction made me understand it a lot better. Like before now, it seems weird that we would call this rebase chapter 2 onto master, but now it makes sense because we're taking this and we're rebasing it onto the tip of master. And so with GitKraken, this is crazy easy because from the master branch, like right now I'm on the master branch, or I'm sorry, I'm on the chapter 2 branch. I'm just gonna right click on master and say rebase chapter 2 into master. And because I have conflicts, it's gonna blow up, but because it's GitKraken, just like before, I can say I want everything from here, I want everything from here. I really just want chapter 3 and chapter 2. And conflict resolution is a human process. Like most of the time when you're resolving conflicts, you're having to look at code and think about it. And when it's something complex, like you refactored some React component from a function into a class, you're gonna have a lot of overlapping, crummy syntax conflicts that you really have to get in and think about. And it's really nice to have this little editor where you can just grab single lines here and stuff and edit them as needed. So at this point, this has been resolved. I'm gonna save it. And we're gonna see that, oh yeah. So now I can continue the rebase. This is just like we saw on the command line. If you have multiple things in the course of rebasing, it's gonna walk you through them. And the same thing is happening here. So I'm actually gonna continue rebasing. And in fact, to give you an example, like earlier today, I'm trying to think of what I did. So I'm working on 2 very similar features that have a lot of overlapping code. One of them got merged in and pushed to master. So I pulled down master with the latest changes and I rebased my branch on master. And down here, instead of rebasing commit 1 out of 1, it said like rebasing commit 7 out of 7 because I had to resolve a whole bunch of conflicts. So I stepped through those conflicts one by one and just resolved them. And you know, it was a really pleasant way to combine those 2 features that I've been working on into one thing. So at this point, chapter 2 is at the tip of master. It's like nothing even happened back here. It's all up here. And I'm actually going to go ahead and push that to GitHub. And this is going to be a forced push because now changes have been made on that branch and they're not the same. So I'm going to force push that up to GitHub. And this is kind of what I mean about GitKraken constantly nagging me to clean up my mess. Because, like, let me just open, like, this is what on a team working on a big project with a lot of features looks like. It's really cool because you can see everybody's, like, GitHub avatar and stuff. And,
Looks very gay.
huh?
Looks very gay.
Yeah, it's very rainbowy. So, like, you can see, this is really nice because, like, if I have to merge into staging or something, I can see, like, if I need to, like, sometimes I need to reset staging to some previous commit because something I pushed up to staging before is conflicting with what I've got. So I'll, like, reset staging. But if somebody else, like, has commits, like, you know, I see that, like, Josh merged something into staging here, I can, like, message him in Slack or something and say, like, hey, do you care if I blow staging up because I see you merge some stuff in? But, like, you know, when my stuff gets out of whack, I sort of, like, see it really quickly. And, like, if master has changes on it, I see these little arrows, and it's just nothing for me to stash whatever I'm working on, hop over to master, pull it down, rebase on it, pop my stash off, and then, like, get back to work knowing that if I finish this feature I'm working on and I push it up, I'm not going to have to go resolve any conflicts before I can merge. So I kind of stay on top of it because what will happen is if you're working on a feature for like a week and you get 6 people merging pull requests and stuff, you're going to have a lot more like stuff you got to do when it's time to create a pull request. And also I kind of like doing this because sometimes I don't want to delete branches yet. Again, here's that like keeping old branches around thing. Like if this gets too long, like I'm gonna see it and start purging stuff. But like everything above master here is kind of like the stuff I'm working on. So like right now, even with one account, like if I have 3 or 4 things that I'm working on, they're all going to be above master because I'm constantly rebasing on master. But you kind of start to see like when there's this much stuff going on, it's kind of nice to be able to see like what the deal is. And this actually goes all the way back to like the beginning of time for this repository. So you can actually go see like everything that's ever happened here. And that's pretty cool. So let's see what else I got. I think I kind of covered all the big stuff that I wanted to. Get interactive rebasing was kind of the thing that spurred me to want to talk about this. Like walking through that and seeing that I can sort of rewrite history, so to speak, because that is a limitation of tools, and this is why it's so important to know the CLI for the tools you use, because GitKraken is not going to let me just drag and drop, commits around to where I want them to be, and that kind of stuff. Like, you kind of need interactive rebasing for that, so you need to know how to wield these tools. So, like, that sort of thing, you definitely want to know. But then, once you know that, for me, using this little dashboard interactively to push and pull and rebase and merge things 1,000 times a day is actually more productive, in my opinion. For me, at least, not for everybody. Like, we've all seen Pritchett and stuff at them. Like, some people are just hackers for real, but I need to see things. So this helps me a lot. And beyond that, I hope, without making this like a shill presentation for GitKraken being awesome, Git's pretty awesome itself. Like, you can do a lot with Git. It's really powerful. People who knock it for whatever reason are usually like emotional about it or something. You don't hear a lot of people bad-mouthing Git unless it's like a hardcore SVN user or something. But yeah, it's pretty nice. And I think, so like, for 8 years or so, I, branched and merged and pushed and cloned stuff and committed, but knowing, stash and squash and cherry pick and rebase and stuff, like, really changed how I use Git altogether. And, to give you a real world example, like, here's a case of where I have been working on something and I've been talking to teammates about it, and I've been editing a lot of the same files over and over, and all 3 of these have the same commit, because what I'm doing here is I can go to GitHub and I can look at a specific commit and see what changes were made in that commit, and I can say, hey, I did this, like, what do you think? And they'll say, no, do this. And it's really the same work. And so what'll happen before I push this up is I'll squash all of these, put the ticket number at the end of it, so it's not just like cluttering up my ticket history, and push up like a nice clean little commit that says edit account admin status with the ticket number, and I'll have all these changes on it. And this is really like anti how I used to be, where I was like, add console log or delete console log, and like all these stupid little commits that don't really like mean anything to anybody. Once you're working on a team, like, a lot of times people don't want to read that stuff. They just want to see the diff.
Go to that add billing transaction branch, the one that I pushed at the last staging.
Okay, hold on.
And then look at its commit history, just the messages, if you have a way of doing that. Because what I've been doing is I've been phrasing my commit messages in feature sets, and I've been rebasing against those, and then before I do my PR, I'm gonna do one big rebase where I take all the feature sets and put them in one squashed commit, broken up.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I had one I did recently where it was like there were 2 commits on the whole thing. It was a lot of work, but yeah, like I do this a lot. And another thing that's cool is a lot of times, like when I squash stuff in GitKraken, which I do minimally. A lot of times I still use interactive rebasing on the terminal because like there are limitations to squashing stuff in this UI. But like this is nice. You know, like when you can go in a commit and it's not 70 different commits, it's one commit with like a list of stuff that was changed. And then you can pretty much just drop this right into your PR description. And it's really nice. I thought of another example earlier. Oh yeah, like I was working on something and I like renamed all of our tests from JS to JSX. And that was a commit that was just sitting on that branch that I ended up creating a new branch for, cherry picking that one commit, submitting a PR for, getting it merged into master, and then rebasing my branch on master was a much cleaner way to deal with that because then, and that was something where I could tell everybody on the team like, hey, I'm renaming all these tests, it's gonna suck, you gotta resolve conflicts, but it's not in the context of some other pull request that I'm working on, it's just like that thing. So all you gotta do is pull it on master and like resolve those conflicts and it works out. So yeah, I mean, the way I use Git has completely changed because when you sort of understand some of they're not hidden or secret tricks or features, it's just standard Git, but you can get a really long way without knowing how to rebase, just merge stuff. But once you can rewrite history and squash commits and edit commit messages and that sort of thing, it opens up a lot of doors to what you can do with Git. I don't really have much more than that. Anybody got questions or anything? Oh yes, I'll just do it.
With your rebasing stuff onto master, why would you prefer that versus say merge master into your branch?
Just because, so if you merge master into your branch, you're gonna have a commit that says merged master into my branch, and then you're gonna have a commit that says merge my branch into master. And like, if you rebase on master, it's like there's no record of you even doing anything before this. Like, you've taken all the work you've done and put it up here without any conflicts, and there is no like funky merging back and forth commit message. It's really like inconsequential, I guess, but now that I've seen that, and I remember hearing Nathaniel talk about it years ago, like, and not knowing what he was talking about, saying that, you know, it's ugly when you have a bunch of merge branch into branch commits on your master, because that merge master into thing is going to end up on master when you merge it back. So you're going to have like commits on master that say merge master into branch. So this just takes all your commits and like, because ultimately here, now when you merge this into master, there's not going to be any of that because nothing's changed since you started working on it, technically.
It also offloads your your merge conflicts. So like when you're doing the rebasing, you handle your conflicts within the rebasing. So you never have that commit where you're like fix merge conflicts or modified multiple files, blah, blah, blah. You know, essentially just rephrasing the fact that you fixed merge conflicts. Because you're doing that within the rebase, so you never have that extra commit of like merge conflicts. And the thing about the rebasing is that as long as, like, if you're committing like most people do in like relatively small feature sets, when you do your conflict resolution, you're doing them in very small sets. So like if you're rebasing against master, but master say is 100 commits ahead, you would have 100 really easy merge conflict resolutions, as opposed to if you tried to merge into that, having thousands of merge conflicts where you're fixing the same merge conflict over and over and over and over and over again because they were applied at different commit history versions. So because of the back and forth merge conflict.
You also run the risk of like if you're working on something for a while, you might end up with like several merge master into my branch commits. But like Josh said, when you rebase, it sort of takes all of those things you would have done, like the case I was talking about a minute ago where I had like 7 conflicts. It walked me through those one at a time. And it wasn't necessarily like 7 different files that had conflicts. A lot of those conflicts were in the same file, but it was saying like, okay, let's look at this first commit. Here's a conflict with what you've got. Fix that. Then we'll move on to the next one. Okay, here's a conflict with the same file from later on, and it fixes that one. So I pulled this up. This is a successful Git branching model. This definitely isn't like what everybody uses, but